Club, I am absolutely thrilled. I have got the lovely Brian Price to talk about his books tonight. And as I was saying, Brian, Kaz normally gets you. So this is it's a nice treat for me to get you all to myself for once. So
Thanks.
would you like to introduce yourself and show off the book?
Yeah, I think quite a few have heard of me. I'm Brian Price. I advise other crime writers, recently credited with keeping Mike Craven out of jail. And I write the DC Mel Cotton series of detective stories set in the imaginary town of Mexton. My latest book is this one, Fatal Blow, which follows on, but is completely readable as a standalone, from Fatal Dose, which was the one about the serial poisoner, which came out earlier this year. And this one starts with a bang, very definitely, because an organised crime group, which they took down in the last book, is seeking its revenge, and they start by blowing up the police station. They then launch various attacks of different sorts on the police officers who they believe were involved in taking them down. And at the same time, Mel Cotton, my main protagonist, if you like, is having to investigate the discovery of bones in the garden which they bought. The thing is, the owner of the bones was last heard of in Australia. So there's a whodunit in here, as well as the normal action stuff, to find out how the bones got there and who's responsible for putting them there.
You don't make it easy for yourself, do you? I mean, as a reader following this book, you can follow everything and you think there's so much going on just with one case, and all of a sudden you've got multiple cases within one book. And how you keep on top of that is a mystery to me as you're writing it.
I think you've got to be careful to make sure that you have actors in the right place at the right time. I think in one book, before it went for editing, and while I was still checking it through, I'd got Mel Cotton interviewing somebody while she was still recovering from a sword attack in hospital. So you've got to go back and check all these things. But one of the reasons I put more than one plot going on at the same time is because that's what happens in real policing. I did a charity gig a couple of years ago with a DI from Bristol, and she said that her murder team's got 15 or more murders going on at the same time. So
Wow.
any one group of police officers could well be working on several cases simultaneously. And the reason Mel is particularly looking after these bones cases because her fiance is injured in a bomb blast, and I won't spoil anything. So for obviously operational reasons, they're keeping her away a bit from the main investigation. So she's got to do this, which she does, her usual competence. But needless to say, she does get involved in the other investigation as well because they're short-staffed.
Kaz is saying, jealous you get to interview Brian this time, Sam. Yes, I have already gloated. I've already been really excited. We've got some hellos. So we've got Sarah, Donna, Kaz. Yeah, so far. And we've got Donna said, such a sweet gentleman writing. Well, that.
Thank you kindly.
You are the sweetest man. I said when Brian arrived, I said, hello, lovely Brian. And I didn't even think that, I was just going to say, hello, Brian. But the lovely it slips out because you are the nicest man.
That's awfully kind of you to say so.
And Sarah's saying a very nice man as well. Oh, you've got a little fan club, Brian.
Blimey, I shall issue autographs.
Absolutely. Right. I wrote as I was reading. I love this book. It's so good. As I was reading Fatal Blow, I wrote great opening line. So, do you want to read the opening line out, or would you like me to read? If you're happy to do it, because I realise I'm putting you on the spot.
No, not at all.
It's such a cracking opening line, and it just grabs you straight away.
All right, Karel, that's spelt the Polish way, lifted the barrier and let the sandwich van into the police station car park, unaware that he had only moments to live.
I mean, if that doesn't grip a reader, I don't know what will.
Do my best.
all of a sudden, you're just thinking, okay, I'm in. And I literally, I was about halfway through a cup of tea when I'd started reading it, and I thought, right, that line, I'm going to need another cuppa. So I put it down because I knew I wasn't going to move for ages, and have a little a thing that I do in the morning where I'll make a cup of tea in a mug, and then I make another one in like a lidded cup to keep it warm. I had to do that because I knew I was going to be sat for a while, and my word, it's so good. Sorry, go on.
One of the blog reviewers was kind enough to say that it'll glue you to the sofa and make sure you've got servants to bring you tea and biscuits. So
that's why I'm married.
People seem to like it, which is nice to know.
You have got some really dedicated fans as well, haven't you? You get great reviews. You've got a lovely little team at Holeback, not just Adrian and Rebecca, but you've got a really lovely author team as well. You're a very lucky man.
Tremendous right. Yes, it's lovely to be in their company.
Absolutely.
I can't name names because that'll be unfair to the others, but put it this way, I read all sorts of crime. I read some sort of quote cozies, I read some of the more harsher stuff, some of the more political stuff, maybe political in a small p, and I've never read a Hobeck book I didn't like. Didn't reckon to be
agreed. Never read a Hobeck book that I didn't like. So and I like the fact that they're so varied.
Sorry,
of course there's. I like the fact that they're so varied.
Yes, indeed, So
I've interviewed a few Hobeck authors now, and you are a cracking bunch. And we've got a few questions already. So here was me preparing lots and lots of questions for you, and I think that the members are going to take over here. So, David Mark asked a great question the other day about good places in Lincolnshire or Humberside to dismember an enemy in fiction. I suggested my birthplace. Who on earth has answered this? I can't see who's asked that. No, it's not showing me. But they suggested their birthplace. Where would you pick? It's a tricky one, isn't it?
Yeah. It depends what you wanted to do with the bits once you dismembered them.
Might be the best answer ever.
Somewhere near a pig farm, maybe. There are so many derelict buildings around in all over the country. In my part of the world, Weston-super-Mare, there are some empty buildings. There are things scheduled for demolition. They demolished the old police station not so long ago, so maybe hiding something in the cells that have never been seen. I did finish the last book, Fatal Dose, in some disused toilets attached to a pier that's actually now going to be renovated in Weston-super-Mare. So, I mean, that's probably not the best site because it's going to be reopened, but any derelict area where people aren't going to go, really. And if you've got some kind of carnivore to get rid of some of the remains, then that makes it easier.
And if there's somewhere that's going to reopen, well, there's an opening for a book. We didn't think that was ever going to open again, and oh no.
Wasn't there an episode of Unforgotten? Or was it one of the TV things? Well, perhaps it was one of the Irish ones, where they opened up, they were going to redevelop a car park or something. And they found that under the car park, there was some human remains, and that led to cold case studies and so on. It was quite a good program. I can't remember which it was, unfortunately.
I don't know about for crime fiction, but wasn't the one where, is it Richard III was found under a car park?
Oh, that's right. That was a rather older death than the ones in the TV.
Yeah, just a tad, yeah.
His bones were found under the car park in Leicestershire. In Leicester itself. And the interesting thing there is they managed to trace who it was through mitochondrial DNA. I think everybody knows that you can get DNA from blood and from hair roots, but you can also get it from the hair shaft because there is mitochondrial DNA, which isn't part of the chromosomes, which is passed down the maternal line, and you still get that persisting in hair even after quite a long time. And I think they also found it in his bones, the chromosomal stuff having sort of disappeared. So, they found these odd bits of bones, managed to get into the depths of the bones and trace it through, I don't know, many generations. And it turned out that that's who it was. Yeah, I think they also used mitochondrial DNA on the Romanovs, the remains of the Romanovs, and found a link with Prince Philip.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
We've got hello from Steve Munoz over in California. Hello, lovely Steve.
Hi, Steve.
Was lucky enough to finally meet Steve last year in Leeds, which was a really nice surprise after kind of being friends online for a long time. So that was nice. Somebody has said Richard III's. Oh, Guy Hale. Richard III's fine for overstaying the car park was millions. Mate, no.
Payable in sovereigns.
Your jokes are normally better than that, Guy. Come on. Oh, Donna's saying, are you regretting having Fatal Something as your titles yet? So I was going to ask you, I wasn't going to ask you if you were regretting it, but I was wondering how many more you've got backed up, ready to go.
I've got a potential title for book 5, which I'm working on at the moment, which I won't say.
Exciting. No, of course.
And there are people there is someone's just published a book called Fatal Shore, but that wasn't one of the ones I was planning to use anyway. I haven't copyrighted it, but Peter James always has dead in the title. And he's not running out of appropriate uses of the word, so probably got a few left. And then there are occasionally duplicates, but 2 people wrote a book called A Taste for Death. One was Peter O'Donnell and one was P.D. James, but nobody minded.
No, because they're going to be completely different books, aren't they?
Yeah.
And actually, if you read one with a good title, I did an interview sometime last year where all of the books were, why can't I remember what they're all called? The Guest House. So I had 2 that actually turned up on the day. And they were very, very different books. I've actually had people message me on Twitter and say, I've got a panel idea for something. Do you think that it's okay to have kind of, the same or similar names? And I said, I think it's great because no 2 books are going to be the same. It's interesting to see what people do with the same title in a different book.
Yeah. Was one of them David Marks?
Yeah, one was David Mark. One was... it was Chris, but was she writing under Chris or Abby Frost? Chris Curran or Abby Frost. I'm not sure which one she wrote it under. I think it was Chris Curran for The Guest House.
I read the David Mark one. I thought it was excellent.
Yeah. That was the thing. I mean, you find 3 books with the same title and they're all excellent. Ready-made panel.
Yes.
Nice and easy. Oh, Donna's saying Leeds was only this year, Sam. I know it feels like it was that long ago, but it was just this year. I don't know what day I'm on, Donna. I don't know what year it is. This is the thing. I get a migraine and details go out of my head. So not in any pain, just a bit thicker than usual. Sarah wants to know, why did you decide to write from the female perspective? I mean, you do have lots of other characters as well, but obviously Mel's the main.
I think the character just sort of came to me. That's a bit sort of spooky, but no, I just seemed that would be a good character to run with. I wanted to avoid the cliche of the sort of alcoholic middle-aged male who's divorced and nobody gets on with him. I think that's been done and sometimes done very well. But I thought let's get a bit more real. I think with because people like that wouldn't last very long in the modern police force. I mean, maybe they would have done in the 70s, but you don't see many Jack Regans anymore.
Donna's rubbing her hands together and laughing. Definitely won't take the... I'm not saying that word on camera, Donna. Definitely won't take the mickey out of Sam Moore. Yes, you will. You mentioned that you read quite widely, and there are lots of different kind of genres under the crime umbrella as such.
Yeah.
Do you think you would ever touch something cozy?
I don't know. I think a lot of those are heavily reliant on characters who, sort of characters of people I don't actually know, have much to do with. I couldn't write something about a village tea shop and the people gathering around the crumpets to solve crimes. Not that I've got anything against that by any means, but it's more the kind. I'm not so good on the psychological interplay, I suppose, of different groups like that. I don't think I'd write a psychological thriller where someone's controlling, usually a woman, and forcing her to do stuff through psychological blackmail and pressures. I'm not a psychologist. I don't think I'd find that easy to write at all. So I tend to stick to procedurals. Although there is a character in the who appears in Fatal Blow, who does have the potential to go off in a more sort of a thriller-based direction, a non-police thriller one. But at the moment, I think Rebecca and Adrian are happy for me to keep writing the Mel Cotton one. So, but that's something I sort of got behind my ear for later, as it were.
Definitely happy with you writing more Mel Cotton books.
Right.
And I mean, you know, as a DC, you've got room to kind of, you know, she's got a long career ahead of her. So you've not made it, you know, you started her off fairly young.
Yeah, I think she's been a DC for about 3 years. I'm trying to lose track. She started really before COVID. So yeah, I guess she's been a DC for about 3 years. She's been a beat constable or a uniform constable for a while before that. So yeah, she's got a trajectory. She's I think she's considering doing the sergeant's exams, because I mean, in the real police service, you don't just apply for a job. If you do, you have to do sergeant's exams, which cropped up quite nicely in Endeavour. They talked about that, and in what was it called? The one with Leslie Sharp and Suran Jones, that excellent Manchester set one.
Oh, I watched a program with Sally Lindsay where she talked about writing it. Yeah. Somebody help us out, because Sally was supposed to star in it opposite Suran, and then couldn't. So, oh, that's going to drive me insane. It'll come to us, or somebody will mention it. I'm going to have to Google it. But yeah, it was. Right.
Anyway, actually, yeah, they did have things like going for sergeant's exams.
Scott and Bailey.
There was one post, and they sort of had to compete for that. Scott and Bailey, that's right. Actually, another thing I liked about that was the interviewing, because there was none of this cough up, you scrote kind of thing. It was really well done in terms of interviewing, because they do specialist training to do interviewing, you know. It's useful. So I had to include some mention to that in Fatal Blow about doing specialist training for that. And then the question of your higher ranks, you have to go towards a promotions board. It's not just a question, oh, you've done jolly well, old chap, let's make you superintendent. It doesn't work like that.
Which is quite a shame for the police involved. But I suppose, you know, a good test to make sure you fit for purpose is a good idea, especially when you're public facing.
Oh, well, yes. The higher you get, the more desk work you do, and the more likely you are to face the public. No more kicking down doors. You know, superintendents don't interview suspects.
I do have to ask how we talked about you packing so much in, so many threads, and you said, you know, sometimes the police can be working on 15 cases at once. Obviously, that might be a bit much in one book, but you have covered lots and lots of themes already in 4 books. Do you ever wonder if you're going to run out?
Well, I suppose eventually you must do, and I think there are some authors who recycle plots, which, you know, if it works, if it's a good story, then why not? But so I do have an idea, a couple of ideas I haven't used for the next book. Beyond that, I'm not so sure, but, you know.
I don't think you'll ever run out. I think I worded that wrong. It's just you can obviously revisit certain themes in different ways as well. You know, there's so much to actually look at, and the world of policing must be changing, the same as the world of publishing's changing, and technology. We were talking a little bit before we went live about the changes in technology, and they must be interesting but difficult to keep up with, because there tends to be kind of a boom and bust. I find in the kind of the medical world, you know, you need lots of bad things to happen to progress things sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, if you're writing a book these days compared with one 40 years ago, no mobile phones, no computers to speak of, no centralized databases on information. People have said, oh, it's a lot easier to write a sort of semi-historical one because you can trace anybody with all these CCTV cameras and so on. Obviously, it doesn't always work, but things which cropped up these days is doorbell cameras. They didn't have those to any great degree when I first started writing, but I mentioned them in Fatal Dose. So yeah, that's another bit of technology. You can trace people's activities and their last moments sometimes with their Fitbits or other fitness trackers.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Telling when their heart stopped. And there was a real life case where somebody had one of these Alexa type things, and it recorded somebody doing something which proved that they were the killer of the person who died. So detectives these days, they are relying on having some technical nous as well as the ability to sift through documents and interrogate people. The technology moves on, as do forensic techniques. The DNA is now quicker to do. I mean, when Colin Pitchfork was convicted, they needed a blood sample about the size of the old half crown, bigger than a current 10p piece, to get enough DNA to do it. Nowadays, you can get it from a flake of skin, which gives its own problems of reliability and contamination. And what was the DNA really doing at the scene? Is it there accidentally, or is it actually proving the killer was there at the right time under the right circumstances? So yeah.
I don't envy you using that in books or the people doing that in real life, having to kind of prove what the evidence means rather than having a theory and seeing if it matches up. It must just be so difficult to do.
Well, I think so. And I think with DNA, which is all over the place, anybody's interested, there's a really good TED talk by Professor Ruth Morgan of the Giordano Institute at UCL about the difficulties of interpreting DNA and other forensic evidence. She says if you walk into a room within 60 seconds, I think your DNA is in that room, along with hundreds of other people's. But it does mean that it could be picked up, and people might say, "Well, why are you in that room when somebody was found dead there?" So it's worth looking at that TED talk.
We've got people making book title suggestions. So Guy is saying, for a cozy book, Fatal Crumpets.
Yeah.
I mean, that's got all kinds of connotations, hasn't it? Crumpet can be used in a myriad of ways.
Better be careful. I did have the idea of a spoof horror story called Fatal Hamsters, where hordes of ravening rodents pour out of cages and people at the Glastonbury Festival. But strangely, Adrian and Rebecca didn't want to go with that one. So
better luck next time. Donna's just said, my Alexa just told me the time when you said that, and I'm really confused by that comment, Donna. Any idea, Brian?
So presumably she interrogated this smart speaker and it spoke back, so there we go.
Possibly. And wow, Donna was saying when she was at uni, she thought the techniques were almost becoming too advanced.
Yeah.
Must be a lot to learn, a lot to keep up with, like we said.
DNA on its own is really sufficient to get a conviction. You've got to have some other supporting evidence, circumstantial witness testimony, or whatever. But it's rare that a conviction will go through just on DNA. But what it is very good for is exonerating people, of course, which is the other side of the coin. And it's saved a lot of people from death row in America when they proved that it couldn't have been them. And of course, the chaps in Cardiff who were falsely convicted of murdering Lynette White.
Yeah, you never really think about how it's actually used to disprove a theory.
Yeah.
That it actually is used to release people who could have been in prison for a long time for something that they really didn't do, maintain their innocence. And the Innocence Project itself is obviously a really important tool for people.
Yeah, too right.
But you don't think of that side of it.
No, I know. And the other point, of course, it can help the police in their investigations, because if you've got DNA showing that it wasn't somebody else, then they're not going to waste time chasing the wrong suspects.
True. I wrote something else down that basically said each part of the book book, so going back to Fatal Blow, we've done half an hour on other things. I feel like we should talk a little bit about the book. How each scene is almost an encompassing story in itself, because there was a scene towards the beginning where there's a briefing, and the tone of the briefing was just so perfect and really set the mood, because there's been this explosion that we're not going to talk about too much. I do think everybody needs to just go and grab this book, and once you start it, you're not going to stop. Get your cup of tea and your extra one in a lidded mug, because you're not going to move. And just each part, each chapter, you just set the tone so well for each scene. And yes, there's humour, and some of the jokes in there made me cackle. You're really funny, which you need when there's some really dark scenes. So I just think it's so tight. Each chapter is so tight. You know, you really feel what they're going through, and that is such a skill.
I'm glad you like that, because the effect on a group of officers, of anybody working together, particularly police officers. I think it was 13 of their colleagues killed in the explosion, plus civilians, plus somebody they had in custody, who they were responsible for. It was devastating. Nobody's going to be making wisecracks. They're going to be angry. They're going to be simmering. They're going to be hurt. And I make reference to, there's counselling available, but there'll be a long queue or something like that. So I couldn't go into the usual kind of flippant remarks you get in the briefing. But gradually, as they get into it, things ease off a bit, and somebody tries to make a bit of a joke and it doesn't happen. And then there's the session in the pub where they unwind, and it's not a spoiler. They're asked to, by the stand-in DI, for examples of humorous or silly or funny things which happen to them while on duty, strange arrests and strange crimes. And they come up with some, I think, rather amusing ones.
I thought so.
And that sort of lightens the mood a bit. And, there is a lot of gallows humour in the emergency service branches of it. But it wouldn't have been appropriate until sometime into the book. I
agree, and you did ease in.
Yeah.
You did ease into it slowly, and at the beginning, the jokes on the team fall flat a little bit, and this kind of little kind of almost smiles, like, see what you were trying to do there, but no. And you build into it gradually, and it is a really appropriate way of handling it.
Yeah, I also had some fun with the names of 60s rock bands and an era with which I'm familiar. So I remember sitting in a university biochemistry lecture, and somebody was talking about a pathway of metabolizing sugars. One was called the pentose phosphate shunt. And I thought that would be a brilliant name for a progressive rock band.
That's where you got that band name from.
Yeah. Right.
Genius.
Can't remember much about the pentose phosphate shunt. It was a long time ago, but it's has a nice combination of words, really.
Mike Craven's been mentioned a couple of times in the comments. So do you want to, I know we've talked about this before, I know you've answered this for us before, but it's just too good not to ask again. So do you want to tell us how you saved Mike from M.W. Craven, for anyone who doesn't know? How did you save him from 10 years in prison?
I don't know what 10 years. Okay, it is an offence under the Counter-Terrorism Act of 2006 to disseminate any information that's likely to be of use for terrorists, which means basically you can't go selling the anarchist cookbook or putting it online, putting recipes up. And in fact, somebody who's about 400 yards from me has recently been at the Old Bailey charged with that particular offence, and the trial continues. And Mike was going to put the recipe for rice in The Botanist, which, if you haven't read it, you really should. It's brilliant.
It is, and I don't know if I can reach it. It's somewhere behind me. Yeah. I'm not trying to touch anything. I'll knock it over.
And I said, Mike, you really shouldn't do that, because that'll be an offence. And okay, the chances of Mike being banged up, is not very high. And if his name was Paddy or Abdul or something, he might have a different story to tell. But he agreed and took it out. Well, the Botanist won the Theakston's Old Peculiar Crime Novel of the Year at Harrogate this year, and he mentioned in his acceptance speech this bit about me, keeping him out of trouble, as it were. And he then quoted it again in the Daily Express and the Guardian. So it's done the rounds a bit, that one. But yeah,
It has done the rounds a bit, but it
underlines
makes me smile.
It underlines the fact that you've got to be careful what you put in a book. There is the bomb in this particular book, and there's other devices. I don't tell you how to make the bomb. I tell you what's in it, but I don't tell you how to construct it. And there are other devices, a detonator. I allude to some of the chemicals involved, but I don't say you do this and you do that. And I left out some of the ingredients, which is what they did in Breaking Bad. If you watch that, the recipe for crystal meth, they deliberately mucked up some of the stages. They had the advice of an American professor on that, a chemistry professor. So they didn't want people copying down the recipe and going out and, killing themselves.
Yeah, that sounds wise. The idea of people trying things like that. Yeah. I mean, you'd hope people will be smarter, but that's not what history tells us.
Yeah, I mean, ISIS are not going to be reading British crime novels for ideas on how to make bombs, but there are a fair few deranged individuals out there, including a Western guy who was convicted about 3 days ago, Weston-super-Mare, for having homemade firearms, real firearms and explosives, and statements about he was going to shoot up his school and he'd got a police uniform to go in there.
Oh my word.
Blow up people who criticise him. It was absolutely deranged. Where he got the information from, it wasn't one of my books, I know that. But
no, definitely not.
A little knowledge can be a dangerous thing.
It can be, yeah. I did notice another familiar name in this book. You used the surname Erskine.
Yes. I wasn't referring to Fiona, no.
You weren't? It really made me smile when I saw the name and I thought, how lovely. But, oh well.
Well, it's a fortunate coincidence, but a couple of the names came from the houses at school. There was a Dornay house, and there's a P.C. Reg Dornay, and there's a Sally Erskine, there's an Erskine house. And I think there might be a Spencer or something, I don't know, but I was just looking for names and I just picked those up. But no, it wasn't a tribute to Fiona, whose books I really enjoy, incidentally.
I might not tell her that. If she ever realises there's an Erskine in the book, we'll just pretend. Just pretend. Somebody has said, where's it gone? Mike told that story in Huddersfield, and it was so interesting to find out why, says Sarah.
Yeah.
We've got Donna saying thanks for asking about Erskine. She wondered too. One of Donna's favourite style of books is when something major happens, but the author carries on with the action like nothing big just happened, but the next thing is huge, keeping the tempo up at crazy levels. I'd say that's an accurate description of some of the scenes in your book, where you think, how can you move on to this bit now? Because why aren't we need more about this bit. We need to, but then we move on, and you kind of put that to the back burner for a minute, move on with the next bit, and then get smacked by the bit that you were trying to think where it was going to go.
Yeah. Well, I try to keep people interested, I guess. I'm not one, people have sometimes said, well, you should do more on character and all that, but people seem to think the characters are developing nicely.
Agreed.
I don't do a huge amount on descriptions of people, certain main characters. I mean, we know that Mel is fairly slim. She's got fair hair, which she tends to wear in a ponytail. She does martial arts, but I don't go into any great detail. We know a bit about some of the others. The DI who comes from, seconded from the Avon Somerset force, we know that he's perhaps a bit portly because of his poor diet, which there are reasons for. I think the other thing is that there's a phrase which I picked up somewhere, don't perv on your characters, where people describe the women in sort of almost lascivious detail, which I don't think is appropriate. So I try and avoid that. But people form their own impressions. Sometimes If they're brought to the screen, then you think, well, that's nothing like that. But 2 examples. Jackson Lamb, that's portrayed by Gary Oldman in Slow Horses, is absolutely brilliant. And any more of Mick Herron's books I read, I'll see him in the Jackson Lamb role. But in Peter Robinson's book, Stephen Tompkinson, who's a fine actor, he just wasn't DCI Banks. In my view, anyway. I think Peter Robinson shared that.
Yeah. It's quite a tricky one, isn't it? Because I'm not sure that I ever really picture the characters, but I do think I develop a sense of them. So for me, I think of Tom Thorne, and I don't think of David, can't think what his last name is, the actor who plays him in the Mark Billingham series.
Morrissey. Was it David
Morrissey? Thank you. Yeah, it is. Thank you. I don't picture him. I don't really picture anyone, but I do smell his leather jacket when I think of him. And I think it's because my brother had one growing up, and there was something about this this leather jacket and this safety to it, and that's what I associate with Tom Thorne. So I think I have different associations than looks with characters. Well, I just learned something about myself.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Sarah's asking if you ever act out any scenes from your books. So do you ever have to kind of try out a fight scene or a placement of something to see that would work in real life?
I think I mentioned the fatal dose ended in these disused toilets by the pier in Weston-super-Mare. And I was looking for somewhere in Weston. It was nice to bring it local. And I got in touch with the trust that ran the pier and are fighting for its restoration. And they basically let me in so I could have a look around. And when I say there's a pile of chairs in the corner, steel chairs in the corner, well, there is. You know, I had to look at. I had to see a venue which would work for that particular scene. So I've done that a bit. Given that Mexton's an imaginary town where most of the action takes place, you've got free reign. You know, need a canal for someone to dump a body in? Yeah, I'll put a canal in. You know, so you can do that. I don't reenact fights. There is a bit of chemistry I'm working on for a plot line in the next book, which I won't give away. But it's just a bit of practical sort of kitchen lab work. No, I don't think I do.
Do you read dialogue aloud to check that it works?
Sorry, do I read things aloud? Occasionally, but my wife's the first person to read my stuff, and she spots things which don't work, either character-wise, plot-wise, or just English-wise, and then I go through it again, and then it goes off to the Hobeck team and the editor there.
So I'm not going to ask you about the title of book 5 yet, but I am going to ask you how far in you are.
About 7,000 words.
So you're literally just starting off.
Pretty much, yeah. I've got. I know how one of the plot lines is going to end, but I've got to get there. And there's a small subsidiary plot which I think I know how that's going to go. The main one, there have been some significant events in it already, which I've described, but it's got a long way to go yet. So we'll see what happens. I don't plan things out on a spreadsheet or anything like that. I get an idea, and I have various things that I know are going to happen. I don't always know how it's going to end. I didn't know how Fatal Blow was going to end, but I know roughly where it's going, and then write and see what happens, and then put it back in the right order, like I said.
I like the fact that you have the at the end the glossary of terms at the end.
Oh yeah.
I think that's really helpful.
Yeah, I'm not the only one who does that. I think Lee Russell does that. I think Chris Brookmeyer is very helpful in one of his books. Put a dictionary of Scottish dialects so that you could know what it means. Yeah, I think there are so many acronyms and other sort of contractions of words and jargon things, which it's useful to have them in the back because people can look them up. And just explain a little bit about what some of these terms are.
We need to discuss upcoming events. So if people would like to go and meet you somewhere, have a book signed, where can they see you? What have you got coming up?
I've got the Dark Side of Brighton thing at the weekend. I'll be there on the Saturday. Donna Morfitt's the organizer of that, and I'm really looking forward to it.
She is.
Lee Russell and Graham Bartlett and I think a couple of other Hobeck authors I think are still coming. So that will be great fun. So I'll be there then. I did have an official launch at Waterstones in Bristol, in Clifton, last week, which was again very nice to see reviewers and friends up there. So it was good. Nothing else planned apart from a chat to a private group in November. But I'm hoping to be up in Leeds in June for this science panel, which people are concocting. So
people are concocting. That might be our first exclusive. We have, of course, yeah. What was I want to ask you about the work that you do alongside writing, because you do write pretty much full time, but you also have your science advisory work.
I wouldn't say I wrote full time. I'd love to be able to. But yeah, I help people out with scientific stuff. I mean, that was how I first met Mike Craven. It was funny because it started when I went to a crime fest a few years back, and I thought, well, look, I'm not a crime writer, but everybody there was so friendly and welcoming. Nobody sort of up on a pedestal or anything like that.
Yeah.
Reading crime ever since somebody let me one of Leslie Charteris's Saint books when I was about 10. I thought, well, how can I contribute to this? I hadn't dreamed of writing fiction. So I set up a website providing tips on how to avoid silly mistakes with chloroform and silencers and the usual stuff, which we talked about before. And then my wife said, well, turn it into a book, which I duly did. But I think Mike must have seen the website because he contacted me and said, well, how can you tell whether an arm's been removed before or after death? So I sent him an email back and gave some information.
Nice normal question from Mr. Craven.
Well, absolutely, yeah. Everyone needs a hobby. But then he came up to me at Crime Fest and said, I ran, was it Crime Fest or Harrogate? One of the two. And he said he ran it past one of the country's leading pathologists. And I thought, oop. And he said, yeah, that's right. So that's validated the stuff. So I helped him with a couple of things ever since. But yeah, I like to see people getting the scientific stuff right, because if there is something on which a plot hinges and it's wrong, then people are going to start, complaining and thinking, dismissing the whole book, which is unfair. But if you can get something right, it's worth doing, given that you've got to telescope things like how long it takes to get toxicology back and things of that sort. But yeah, I do that. I've been helping out one or two members of this book club as well. So all good fun. What have I been looking at lately? Time of Death, which is always a black art, highly unreliable. Insulin, I've been looking at. That was on a different correspondence in a different Facebook group. Various poisonings, that kind of stuff. People come up to you and ask me how to poison people.
One of the things that I do know is that you are very careful not to help people get away with murder properly.
Well, that's right. I mean, the perfect crime, I suppose, is one which no one realizes is a crime and there is no investigation. With modern resources, most crimes could be solved given a certain amount of luck, a lot of diligence. And I mean, Angela Gallup, Professor Gallup, who's one of the leading forensic scientists in this country, said, well, if people get away with murder, it won't be because there is lack of knowledge or skills or lack of science. It'll be because of lack of resources, because the labs are backed up, tests cost money. As excuse me, as Donna was saying about things getting more advanced, frequently means more expensive.
Yeah.
You're going to have to prioritize, which case gets 10,000 spent on analyses, in which case gets 500 quid or whatever the relevant figures are, because they change. So yeah, there are issues of that, but no, I don't. My villains generally get caught. If they don't, there is a very good reason why I don't want them to get caught. Saving them up for later, maybe.
Which I love. Julie Anderson has said, crime writers, I was told years ago, were the nicest people because they get all the angst out on the page. The same author who told Julie that also said that children's authors were the most competitive. A good reason to write crime, the bloodier the better.
I've heard similar. My alternative version is that romance writers are the most.
That's what Donna said.
Backbiting, yeah, and stabby in that.
Yeah, I am literally standing back. I do not want to be attacked by writers. I will stay out of it. I will say that the crime writers are the best I've ever met.
Oh, lovely people, yes. Their imaginations may be seething masses of violence and gore, but they're very nice people.
It is the strangest way to relax when you think about it.
Yeah.
But you're the one who writes it, so I don't know which one of us I should be more wary of.
Well, I make it very clear to people that most of these things I write about aren't based on personal experience. Some of the chemistry is maybe, but not.
I should hope not.
But I do have a lovely collection of empty poison bottles.
I've seen some of your some photos that you've shared of the poison bottles before, and you've got, they're really interesting.
Yeah, the bottle on the front of Fatal Dose. I'll show it to you. There we are. That strychnine bottle is mine, and actually inside it you can see the seeds of the plant which produces strychnine, which you can buy on the internet. Turn them into bracelets or something. You can swallow them and it won't do any harm, but there are ways, which I won't discuss, on getting strychnine out of that. But they're not legal. You need a license to possess strychnine. They're not covered because they're just seeds.
Have you ever visited Alnwick Poison Garden?
Yes, indeed, I did.
Have you really? It's on my list of things that I really want to do.
Yeah, well, they don't give free samples,
Foiled again.
It's just very interesting, yeah. But you can find some in the garden centre.
True. It's just, I think it's the idea of it, isn't it? It's a poison garden.
Yeah.
It's that draws you in. Going to the RSC around the corner, as lovely as that is not quite the same as going to somewhere called a poison garden.
True enough.
There's just something almost naughty about the idea, isn't there?
Well, the sort of
you kind of feel like you really shouldn't be there.
The Gothic ironwork on the entrance gate, sort of adds to the mood and all that.
Yeah, it's definitely on the list. Donna's saying she knows some romance writers who are utterly gorgeous humans, so she doesn't believe that either. I'm still staying out of it. Sarah wants to know what you think your Google search would say about you. Do you double check lots and lots of things online? Do you have books that you check things in when you're not, unless you're certain of it already yourself?
My Google search, well, it would look at all kinds of stuff. The medical literature, toxicology. Very good idea not to Google explosives, because I mentioned the Prevention of Terrorism Act. Later than that, the Counter-Terrorism and Border Security Act now makes it illegal to look up some of this stuff. It used to be illegal to collect it or disseminate it. Excuse me, which was Mike's thing. It's now actually illegal to look up how to make bombs or explosives like TATP and stuff. So I've been very careful not to do that. I used to work for the Environment Agency, and one of the jobs I had was going through the chemicals which are restricted, monitored under what they call the pollution inventory. And I was doing it from home on my own laptop. Some of the chemicals involved are highly poisonous, some of them are explosive. All these things are used in industry or made in industry, so you've got to monitor them if they get into the water or something.
Yeah.
And I asked Lisa Cutts at a Crime Fest thing. She was a DC, I think, at the time. I said, well, look, I've been looking up all this stuff. Am I likely to get into trouble? And she said, well, no, probably not, unless your computer gets in to be mended at a computer repair place, and they phone the police, in which case you might have some questions to answer. But we do know, I think, if you talk to people like Anthony Johnston, that the security services will have a kind of flag on certain combinations of words. So if you're going to say something like Blue Water Shopping Centre, jihad, TATP, combinations like that, then you might get that early morning knock on the door. But the other point, which I think he also made when I spoke to him, is that there are so many billions of messages flying around the internet that they may not even pick up that, and if they did, they wouldn't have a chance to act on everything they see. But no, it's just be careful, don't give too much details away, and just don't be daft, really.
Like interviewing a crime writer on my IP address, who then says things like that.
Well,
which one of us is getting somebody abseiling through the window, Brian? Is it me or is it you?
I gave you no information of any use of terrorists, did I? But yeah,
no,
I mean, I do
absolutely no.
I do look at loads of stuff, but if you're, I suppose the fact that I've got chartered status as chemist and biologist gives you a kind of authenticity in terms of it. If I'd had lots of convictions for assault and riot and other undesirable things, and was looking up what sulfuric acid does to people, then that would be, at a trial, it would be evidence of nefarious intent, at least.
I do think maybe I should be a little more hesitant before I Google things after this conversation. I've not Googled anything to do with poisons or bombs or anything like that, but I will be very, very wary in future. Hadn't really occurred to me. I used to be scared of Googling things, and now I Google all sorts to do fact checks. But,
well, no, I think that's fair enough, because if you're writing a book, you've got a justifiable excuse, and certainly one of the definitions for looking this stuff, or one of the excuses, if you like, reasonable use, is if you're a journalist and something happens in a shopping centre, a substance is mentioned, then a journalist may want to look it up to find out what's going on. But that is a lawful excuse, if you like. But if you're just sitting there and you're surrounded by lots of right-wing literature and you're clearly deranged, then it's all to do with the context, I think.
Well, that's reassuring. I'm glad to hear that. Donna's saying, apparently there's some people that don't listen to instructions and fall ill while they're at Alnwick Poison Garden. There's a super poisonous plant that's kept in a glass case. They do have different plants in cages that you can't reach, I'm aware of. But yeah, things must be kept. I mean, some of it you can walk right up to, can't you? Some of it's more how it's removed that's the problem, rather than the actual touching of it.
Oh yeah, I mean, there are some things, if you touch them, then you can be really quite ill. There's a particular tree which name escapes me, where touching the leaves and that, you can get some kind of illness from it. And there are certainly things you don't want little kids to swipe and start chewing. But something like the castor bean plant, the one which contains it's the common ornamental plant in appropriately there's some growing in the cemetery, which I look over when I'm writing. But that's harmless. And even if you swallow the beans, you won't get ricin poisoning. You have to process it to get the ricin out, which is where the terrorism business comes in, because that's counts as a biological weapon. So yeah, they have to be very careful there aren't accidents, and maybe they had a few unfortunate incidents and started being more careful. When I'm there, I don't remember seeing anything in a cage. But that was a good few years ago. It must have been 10 years ago, a long time.
I think the last thing that I saw that was in a cage, there was a cannabis plant, and I'm sure there was something else.
They were applying for a license to grow erythroxylum coca, the thing you get cocaine from. And I presume it could well have been something like that, just to stop people pinching it and chewing it or something. So yeah, I mean, if they were if they got a license from the Home Office, I'm sure they would have been told to keep it absolutely secure, like a controlled drugs cabinet, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah. But they didn't have it.
Well, what a way to end. We're almost out of time. I'm always fascinated by the things that we talk about, or the things that Kaz normally gets to ask you, and I normally start typing away in the comments trying to get different information for things. It's been really, really lovely to talk to you. Congratulations on another excellent Mel Cotton book.
Thank you.
They just keep getting better and better. And we'd love to have you back when book 5's finished.
Absolutely. I think sometime next year, but not quite sure when. If it's ready for
Drop
Harry,
me
brilliant.
a message and then
I will do. Yeah.
book you in once you've got a date.
Yeah, I have no idea what I'll be doing for the early part of next year, but it's aimed for next year at some point.
Fantastic news. Thank you to everyone who's joined us, asked questions, taken the mickey out of us. Thank you. We always appreciate that. And yeah, thank you, Brian, so much. It's been an absolute joy to talk to you again.
Great fun. Thank you.